The sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the quiet streets of Maplewood. It was the kind of evening that typically brought a sense of peace, but tonight, an unsettling silence hung in the air. When a call came in about the disappearance of Emily Carter, a local waitress known for her bright smile and infectious laughter, the town collectively held its breath. Detective Arthur Mills arrived at the scene, his brow furrowed as he stepped out of his car. "Another one, huh?" his partner, Officer Jenna Lee, remarked, glancing over at the small group of concerned neighbors gathered at the edge of the police tape. "Just a few weeks ago, it was Tom, and now Emily. What's happening to our town?" "We'll find her, Jenna," Mills replied, his voice steady but low. He had witnessed too much darkness in his career, and while dread gnawed at his insides, he refused to show it. "We need to start with her last known whereabouts. Let's talk to the witnesses." As they moved towards the crowd, Mills' thoughts drifted to Emily's last day. He envisioned her bustling around the diner, serving coffee and cracking jokes with the regulars. Flashbacks played in his mind. The way she had tossed her hair back, how her laughter could light up even the gloomiest of days. But then, that brightness faded into a chilling void. "Detective, over here," called a voice, pulling him back to the present. A woman, her hands trembling, stepped forward from the onlookers. "I saw her last. She was leaving the diner around 10 p.m. She seemed anxious." "Anxious?" Mills questioned, leaning in closer. "Did she say anything? Did she mention anyone following her?" The woman hesitated, her eyes darting around as if the shadows themselves were listening. "No, nothing like that. But I just had this feeling, you know?" Mills nodded, understanding that instinct often spoke louder than words. As he took down her information, he felt the weight of the community's fear pressing down on him. Each disappearance was a thread unraveling the very fabric of their lives. "We need to find Emily before it's too late," he said, determination hardening in his voice. "Let's check the diner's security footage. Maybe we can catch a glimpse of what happened after she left." As they made their way to the diner, Mills couldn't shake the feeling that the shadows were closing in, not just around his town, but around him too. He had seen the impact of trauma before, how it could seep into the lives of even the most innocent. As they arrived at the diner, the flickering neon sign seemed to pulse with an ominous energy, foreshadowing the dark path that lay ahead. The days that followed Emily's disappearance were heavy with tension, each hour stretching far beyond the last. Detective Arthur Mills found himself entrenched in a web of interviews, each one revealing unsettling fragments of a larger, more sinister picture. As he sat in the dimly lit room with another witness, a young man named Ryan, Mills felt the weight of the community's fear pressing against his chest. "I saw her the night she disappeared," Ryan began, his voice trembling slightly. "She was different, nervous, like she was looking over her shoulder." Mills leaned in, his pen poised over a notepad. "What do you mean? Did you notice anyone suspicious?" "Not really," Ryan replied, his gaze shifting to the floor. "But I remember thinking it was odd. She was always so cheerful, you know? That night, it was like she was a different person." As Ryan spoke, Mills' mind raced with the implications. Each victim, a local who had crossed paths with the killer in mundane settings. It was a chilling realization that struck him like a cold wave. Emily, Tom, and now others who had disappeared, all leading lives that intertwined with the fabric of Maplewood. "After she left the diner, I saw her walk towards the park," Ryan continued, a hint of regret in his tone. "I should have followed her, done something." "You did the right thing by coming forward," Mills reassured him, though he knew the guilt would linger. "Every detail is important." With each interview, a pattern began to emerge. The victims had all frequented the same spots: the diner, the local grocery store, the park. Places where they felt safe, yet had unknowingly crossed paths with a predator. As Mills pieced together these ordinary settings, he couldn't shake the feeling that the killer was choosing these locations deliberately, exploiting the town's trust. Days turned into a blur of questioning, and Mills found himself diving deeper into the backgrounds of the victims. Emily, a single mother juggling 2 jobs, and Tom, a veteran struggling with his past, each had their own battles, making them relatable and real. The community felt their loss profoundly, and Mills recognized the urgency of his task. "Detective, you need to see this," Jenna interrupted, entering the room with a sense of urgency. She held a folder filled with photographs. "It's the security footage from the diner. We caught something unusual." Mills' heart raced as he took the folder from her. Inside were images of the night Emily disappeared, flickering shadows playing across the screen. A figure lingered just outside the diner, hooded and obscured, watching. "Can you enhance this?" Mills asked, already formulating a plan in his mind. "I'll get to it," Jenna replied, her determination mirroring his own. As they reviewed the footage together, Mills couldn't help but feel the dark thread of fate weaving through the lives of these victims, connecting them in ways they couldn't have imagined. He understood that the killer was not just targeting individuals, but was feeding off their vulnerabilities, preying on their struggles, their fears. "We need to warn the community," Mills declared, his voice firm. "They need to be aware of their surroundings, to look out for one another." Jenna nodded, her expression resolute. "But we also need to tread carefully. We don't want to incite panic." As they navigated the delicate balance of informing the public while maintaining order, Mills felt the familiar pang of responsibility. He was not just chasing shadows. He was seeking justice for those who could no longer fight for themselves. The killer may have left a trail of chaos, but Mills was determined to uncover the truth, one thread at a time. Just then, a notification pinged on Mills' phone. It was a message from the station, a new report of a missing person. The dread that had been a constant companion now surged to the forefront of his mind. The shadows were closing in, and with each passing moment, the urgency grew. He turned to Jenna, his resolve hardening. "We need to get back out there. The pattern may be deeper than we thought." As the investigation progressed, Detective Arthur Mills found himself drawn into the darker recesses of the human psyche. Each victim's story was not just a tragic ending, but a haunting memory that lingered, echoing the unresolved trauma that seemed to bind them to the killer. He needed to understand the mind behind the horror, the driving force that led someone to prey upon the innocent. Mills arranged a meeting with Dr. Eleanor Hayes, a renowned criminal psychologist whose insights could shed light on the killer's motivations. The sterile office, filled with books on human behavior and framed degrees, felt both intimidating and inviting. Dr. Hayes was a woman of sharp intellect, her piercing gaze assessing Mills as he took a seat across from her. "Detective Mills, I've reviewed the profiles you provided," she began, her voice calm, yet filled with authority. "What we're dealing with is not just a murderer, but someone who thrives on control, perhaps rooted in their own unresolved trauma." "Trauma?" Mills echoed, his brow furrowing. "You mean to say this killer was a victim themselves?" "In many cases like this, yes. Often, they've experienced some form of abuse or abandonment, and they project their pain onto others," she explained, leaning forward slightly, her fingers steepled. "They take control of their victims in a twisted attempt to regain power over their own lives." Mills felt a chill run down his spine. The patterns he had identified, the shared struggles of the victims, suddenly took on a new meaning. So, by targeting these individuals, they're reliving their own traumas? "Precisely," Dr. Hayes affirmed. Each victim represents a fragment of their own experience. It's a grotesque form of therapy, if you will. They're trying to fill a void, to exert power in a world where they felt powerless. That's terrifying, Mills whispered, his mind racing. Memories of his own past bubbled to the surface. His childhood, marred by the shadows of a broken home. He had fought through his own demons, but what if he, too, had walked the fine line between hunter and hunted? Detective, Dr. Hayes's voice cut through his reverie. You seem troubled. I've had my share of challenges, Mills admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. I've seen how trauma can warp a person's mind. Sometimes, I wonder if I'm too close to this case. Understanding your own trauma is crucial, she replied empathetically. But remember, it's essential to separate your experiences from the case at hand. You're seeking justice, not revenge. Justice, Mills echoed, the word heavy with meaning. He took a deep breath, grounding himself in his purpose. I need to find this killer before they can hurt anyone else. But how do I outsmart someone who is driven by such deep-seated pain? You need to think like them, Dr. Hayes advised. Identify their triggers, their patterns. Only then can you anticipate their next move. Remember, they are not invincible. They've built their facade upon fear, just as much as their victims have. As the conversation deepened, Mills realized that understanding the killer's psyche was not just about solving the case. It was also a reflection of his own journey. He felt a sense of kinship with the victims, each of them battling their own shadows. The lines separating him from the killer began to blur, revealing the complexities of human nature. Thank you, Dr. Hayes, Mills said, rising from his seat. Your insights have given me much to consider. Be careful, detective. The ghosts of the past can lead you down dangerous paths, she warned, her gaze steady as he left her office. Back in his car, Mills reflected on their conversation. He was determined to face the darkness, not just for the victims, but for himself. The killer was a ghost in the dark, but Mills was ready to confront that ghost, armed with knowledge and driven by a need for resolution. The air was thick with tension as Detective Mills gathered the surviving witnesses in a dimly lit community center. The walls, adorned with faded photographs of happier times, felt like a stark contrast to the grim reality they faced. Each witness wore a mask of trauma, their eyes reflecting a shared horror that bound them together, yet kept them apart. Thank you all for coming, Mills began, his voice steady but laced with empathy. I know this isn't easy, but your stories could help us find answers. The group shifted uncomfortably, a palpable silence filling the space until a young woman named Sarah broke it. I keep replaying that night in my head, she admitted, her voice trembling. I can't shake the feeling that if I had done something differently, maybe... It's not your fault, another witness, a middle-aged man named Tom, interjected. We were all victims here. It's easy to get caught in the what-ifs. His gaze was intense, a mix of anger and pain evident in his expression. But I saw something, Sarah insisted, her eyes widening as she spoke. I was walking home when I noticed a shadowy figure near the park. I thought it was just my imagination, but now. You should have reported it. Tom snapped, frustration bubbling to the surface. Enough! Mills raised his voice, cutting through the rising tension. We're not here to blame each other. Sarah, can you tell us exactly what you saw? Sarah hesitated, her fingers twisting the hem of her sweater. It was just a glimpse. A man, tall, and he had this odd way of standing, like he was waiting. I remember feeling this chill run down my spine. Did you recognize him? Mills pressed, leaning forward, his keen detective instincts kicking in. No, but he reminded me of someone, she murmured, lost in thought. A guy from the diner I used to work at. He was always lurking around, but I never thought much of it. What was his name? Mills asked, scribbling notes furiously. Jake, I think. Jake something, Sarah replied, wiping away a tear. We need to follow that lead, Mills said, his mind racing with possibilities. He turned to the group. Does anyone else have something to share? A quiet voice piped up from the corner. It was Emily, a petite woman with dark circles under her eyes. I don't remember much, just flashes, but I keep seeing the same face in my dreams. It feels like he's watching me. That's a normal reaction, Mills assured her gently. It's called trauma-induced memory. Your mind is trying to protect you. Or make me crazy, Emily whispered, her voice barely audible. You're not crazy, Tom said softly, his demeanor shifting. We're all just trying to cope in our own ways. As the conversation continued, Mills noted an unsettling shift. One witness, a man named Greg, who had been sitting quietly, suddenly interjected with fervor. We can't just sit here and talk. We need to find this monster. I've been researching everything I can, tracking down leads, even scouring old police reports. I know there's something we're missing. Greg, you need to be careful, Mills cautioned, sensing the obsession brewing within him. This case can consume you. Consumed? No, it's my duty, Greg argued, his voice rising. People are dead. I won't sit idle while the killer walks free. The room fell silent, the tension palpable. Mills could see the determination in Greg's eyes, but he also recognized the danger of crossing into obsession. Finding justice is important, but we must do it together, without losing ourselves to the darkness, he advised, his voice firm. As they wrapped up the meeting, Mills felt the weight of their shared trauma. Each witness was a thread in the tangled fabric of the case, their stories weaving a narrative that was both harrowing and enlightening. He understood now that their experiences, though painful, held the potential to illuminate the path forward. Outside, the night was darker than usual, the shadows appearing to stretch longer as Mills made his way to his car. He couldn't shake the feeling that Greg's fervor, while admirable, could lead him down a dangerous path. The whispers of the past were not just echoes. They were warnings, and the ghosts they conjured would linger long after the case was closed. Detective Mills sat at his cluttered desk, the dim light from his desk lamp illuminating a wall plastered with photographs of victims, maps, and timelines. The case had consumed him, and the pressure was palpable. The community had grown restless, and the media frenzy surrounding the murders only added to the chaos. He could hear the distant hum of reporters outside the precinct, their voices rising and falling like the tide, hungry for answers. Mills, you've got to see this. His partner, Officer Ramirez, burst into the office, a newspaper clutched in her hand. The headline screamed, "Vigilante Justice? Community demands answers." She slammed the paper down on the desk, frustration etched across her features. "I can't let them down," Mills replied, his voice strained. "These people need closure. They deserve to feel safe again." "But at what cost?" Ramirez countered, crossing her arms. "You're not just a detective. You're a human being. You can't let this consume you." Mills leaned back in his chair, running a hand through his hair. "I know, but every minute I spend not solving this feels like a betrayal to the victims, especially to Sarah. If I don't find this killer soon, I'll be letting everyone down." "You're not a one-man army," she reminded him gently. "You've got a team. Use us, Mills. We can't afford to lose you to this madness." Just then, a knock came at the door, interrupting their conversation. It was Greg, the witness whose obsession had been growing since their last meeting. His eyes were wild, a mix of fear and determination. "Detective Mills, I have something important. You have to listen." Mills exchanged a glance with Ramirez before motioning for Greg to sit. "What is it, Greg?" You seem agitated. I've been digging deeper into the background of the victims, Greg began, his voice trembling with urgency. There's a connection I found. They all frequented the same diner, and I think I've identified a suspect. A suspect? Mills leaned forward, intrigued. Who? Jake. Jake from the diner. I told you about him, right? Greg's eyes sparkled with excitement. He was always lurking around, and I've seen him at odd hours, especially when something happened to one of the victims. That's a solid lead, Mills acknowledged, scribbling notes. But we need more than just a hunch. We need evidence. Greg's enthusiasm dimmed slightly. I can get more information. I'll go back to the diner and see what I can find out. No, Mills interjected firmly. You'll put yourself at risk. We need to approach this carefully. As Greg left, Mills felt a knot tightening in his stomach. He could sense the growing obsession within Greg, mirroring his own. Meanwhile, the community's demands for answers echoed in his mind, amplifying the pressure. Later that evening, Mills returned home to find his wife, Lisa, waiting for him in the living room. The flickering light from the television cast shadows on her worried face. You're late, she said, her voice edged with concern. I saw the news, Mills. They're talking about you, about the case. You need to step back. I can't, Lisa. I need to find this killer, Mills replied, frustration bubbling beneath the surface. The community is counting on me. And what about us? She asked, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. You're losing yourself in this. I don't even recognize you anymore. Mills sighed, running a hand over his face. I'm doing this for them, for the victims, for the families. But what about our family? She pressed. You're not the only one hurting here. I need you, Mills. We need you. The weight of her words hung heavy in the air. He could feel the walls closing in, the shadows of his obsession creeping closer. I'll figure it out, Lisa. I promise. As he lay in bed that night, sleep eluded him. The faces of the victims haunted his thoughts, their silent screams echoing in his mind. He knew he was walking a fine line between justice and obsession, and the shadows were closing in. He had to chase them down before they consumed him entirely. Detective Mills stood in the interrogation room, a palpable tension weaving through the air as he prepared for the final interview. The dim light flickered overhead, casting shadows that danced ominously against the walls. He had spent countless hours piecing together fragments of evidence, and it all led to this moment. A soft knock interrupted his thoughts, and Officer Ramirez entered, her expression serious. You ready for this? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Mills nodded, his heart racing. I have to be. This could be the breakthrough we need. The door creaked open, and Greg was ushered in, a mix of anxiety and determination etched on his face. Detective, I've been thinking about what I saw that night, he began, his eyes darting around the room. I can't shake the feeling that I know this person. It's like they were familiar. Tell me everything, Mills urged, leaning forward. The way he moved, the way he spoke, it was almost like he was trying to blend in, but there was something off, Greg replied, his voice trembling. I never thought it would be someone from the community. Mills felt a chill run down his spine. You think you can identify him? Greg hesitated, then nodded slowly. If I see him again, I'll know. I just need to be sure. We can set up a lineup, Mills suggested, his mind racing with the implications. But you have to be careful. This is dangerous. Just then, the door swung open, and a uniformed officer stepped in, holding a folder. Detective, you need to see this, he said, handing over the file. Mills opened it, his breath catching in his throat as he scanned the contents. It contained photographs, background checks, and connections that tied the killer to the victims. No way, he murmured, disbelief flooding through him. This can't be right. What is it? Ramirez asked, peering over his shoulder. Jake from the diner, Mills said, his voice low. He's been in trouble before, assault charges, stalking, and he knew all of them. Greg's face paled. I knew it. I had a gut feeling. We need to confront him. Mills felt a surge of determination mixed with fear. We will, but we need to be smart about it. This has to end tonight. As they prepared to leave, Mills felt the weight of the community's expectations heavy on his shoulders. The pressure was mounting, but he would not let them down. They arrived at the diner, the familiar neon sign flickering ominously in the dark. The atmosphere was thick with tension as they entered, the clatter of dishes and murmurs of patrons fading into silence. Mills scanned the room, spotting Jake seated at the far end, his demeanor relaxed and casual, as if he had no idea what was coming. Stay close, Mills instructed, his voice low. As they approached, Jake looked up, surprise flashing across his face. Detective Mills, what brings you here? He asked, feigning innocence. We need to talk, Jake, Mills said, his tone firm. About the murders. Jake's smile faltered, and for a brief moment, a flicker of fear crossed his features. I don't know anything about that, he stammered, his bravado slipping. We have evidence that ties you to the victims, Mills pressed, leaning in closer. You were seen with them on multiple occasions. You're making a mistake, Jake shouted, suddenly defensive. Am I? Mills shot back, his patience wearing thin. You think you can hide behind a facade? We know who you are. The diner erupted in chaos as patrons began to murmur and gasp, the reality of the situation sinking in. Mills could feel the eyes of the community on him, their hopes and fears intertwining in a single moment. You're just trying to pin this on me, Jake yelled, standing up abruptly, knocking over his chair. You don't have anything. I have everything, Mills retorted, stepping closer. And you're going to answer for what you've done. Just then, the tension reached a boiling point as Jake attempted to flee. Mills reacted instinctively, grabbing his arm and spinning him around. You're not going anywhere. The scuffle drew the attention of other officers who rushed in, quickly subduing Jake as he struggled against their grip. The patrons watched in stunned silence, the reality of the killer's identity crashing down upon them. Later, as Mills stood outside the diner, the cool night air biting at his skin, he felt a mix of triumph and dread. He had unmasked the ghost that haunted their community, but at what cost? The faces of the victims swirled in his mind, their stories intertwining with the truth he had just uncovered. What happens now? Greg asked, his voice shaky as he stepped beside Mills. Now, we face the fallout, Mills replied, glancing back at the diner filled with locals processing the shocking news. The community deserves to know the truth, but it won't be easy. As they drove back to the precinct, Mills couldn't shake the feeling that the shadows of this case would linger, their impact echoing through the lives of everyone involved. The unmasking had begun, but the real work was just starting. As dawn broke over the horizon, Detective Mills found himself standing at the edge of the town square, where the faint glow of the morning sun began to illuminate the remnants of the night's chaos. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of fresh coffee from the diner, now a symbol of both despair and resilience. He watched as locals slowly emerged from their homes, their faces weary but determined, ready to confront the aftermath of the horrors they had endured. You all right, Mills? Officer Ramirez approached, concern etched on her face. Mills sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. I don't know, Ramirez. It feels like we've uncovered a darkness that won't simply fade with the dawn. You did what you had to do, she replied softly, her voice steady. But it's okay to feel shaken. You've carried this weight for far too long. As they walked through the square, Mills noticed small groups forming, survivors of the ordeal. They were sharing stories, some laughing softly, others wiping away tears. It was a moment of collective healing, and for the first time since the investigation began, he felt a flicker of hope. "Look," Ramirez pointed towards a gathering near the old oak tree, where Greg stood with a group of survivors. "They're organizing a support group." Mills paused, his heart swelling as he observed Greg animatedly speaking to a few others, his hands illustrating the importance of community. "You know, he's been through hell, yet here he is trying to help others," Mills commented, admiration in his voice. "Exactly," Ramirez said, her eyes softening. "He's a testament to resilience. You've all been through something unimaginable, but you're not alone in this." Just then, Greg caught Mills and waved him over. "Detective, come join us." His enthusiasm was infectious, and Mills felt a pull to step into the light, to be part of the healing process he had fought so hard for. "You should go," Ramirez encouraged, nudging him forward. "You need this just as much as they do." Hesitating for a moment, Mills took a deep breath and crossed the square. As he approached, Greg introduced him to the group. "This is Detective Mills, the man who helped us find our strength again. Thank you for believing in us," one woman said, her voice trembling with gratitude. "I don't know how I would have gotten through this without you." Mills felt a warmth spread through him, a reminder that even amid darkness, connections could be forged. "I didn't do it alone," he replied, looking around at the faces of those who had shared in the struggle. "It's your courage that inspired me to keep going." As they shared stories of their experiences, Mills realized he was not merely a figure in their lives, but a part of their healing journey. Each story unveiled layers of trauma, resilience, and an unbreakable spirit that had emerged from the shadows. Later that day, Mills found himself alone in his office, reflecting on the changes he had undergone throughout this ordeal. The investigation had transformed him, peeling back layers he didn't know existed. He had entered the darkness seeking justice, but emerged with a deeper understanding of humanity. Just then, a knock interrupted his thoughts. It was Greg again, this time holding a small stack of papers. "Detective, I've been working on something," he said, a hint of excitement in his voice. Mills raised an eyebrow, curious. "What's that?" "A community initiative. We want to create a support network for survivors and their families, a place where we can share and heal together," Greg explained, his passion evident. Mills felt a surge of pride. "That's an incredible idea, Greg. I'd love to help in any way I can." "Thanks, Detective. I think we can really make a difference," Greg said, his eyes shining with determination. As Mills looked at Greg, he understood that this was a new beginning, not just for the community, but for himself as well. The shadows of the past would always linger, but together they could step into the light and forge a path forward. As the last light of day faded into a twilight hue, Detective Mills stood once more at the town square, watching the flickering street lamps begin to glow, casting long shadows across the pavement. The weight of the past few weeks hung heavily in the air, a blend of relief for the resolution of the case and an unsettling awareness that the darkness had not been fully vanquished. "It's quiet tonight," Officer Ramirez commented, pulling her jacket tighter against the evening chill. Mills nodded but didn't respond, lost in thought. The community had begun to heal, but he could still sense the undercurrents of fear lurking in the corners of their minds. "Do you ever wonder if we really solved anything?" he finally asked, breaking the silence. Ramirez glanced at him, her brow furrowing. "What do you mean?" "We caught the killer, but the shadows remain. I see it in their eyes," Mills said, gesturing subtly towards a small group of townsfolk gathered nearby. Their laughter seemed strained, and their smiles didn't quite reach their eyes. "It's going to take time, Mills," she replied gently. You can't expect them to bounce back overnight. The scars run deep. Just then, a figure emerged from the darkness, a woman named Clara, one of the survivors Mills had met during the support group meetings. "Detective, can we talk?" she asked, her voice shaky yet determined. Mills stepped forward, his concern evident. "Of course, Clara. What's on your mind?" "I've been thinking a lot about what happened, and I can't shake the feeling that something still isn't right," she confessed, her eyes darting nervously around. "There are whispers, strange occurrences. I know it sounds paranoid, but what kind of occurrences?" Mills pressed, his curiosity piqued. "People have seen a man lurking around, in places he shouldn't be. It's like the nightmare just won't end," she whispered, her voice barely above a tremor. Mills exchanged a glance with Ramirez, a chill crawling up his spine. "Did you report this?" he asked, his tone firm. Clara shook her head. "Who would believe me? I don't want to sound crazy." "You're not crazy," Mills assured her, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "But we need to take this seriously. If there's even a chance that someone else is out there, we can't ignore it." As Clara nodded, Mills felt the weight of responsibility settle more heavily upon him. The shadows of the Night Stalker may have receded, but the potential for another threat loomed ominously in the periphery. After their conversation, Mills returned to his office, the night pressing in around him. He rifled through the files of the case, hoping to find something, anything, that could provide clarity. Yet the deeper he delved, the more he realized that the roots of violence in their community ran deeper than this one individual. He picked up a pen and scrawled notes on a notepad, reflecting on the broader implications of what had transpired. "Violence breeds trauma, and trauma lingers," he muttered to himself, the words echoing in the stillness of the room. What had begun as a pursuit of a single killer had opened up a conversation about safety, vulnerability, and the scars that linger long after the chaos fades. Just then, a notification pinged on his phone. It was a message from Greg, the community initiative leader. "We need to talk. I've heard something unsettling." Mills' heart raced as he quickly typed back, "I'm on my way." The lingering sense of unease wrapped around him like a shroud as he prepared to step back into the night, a stark reminder that while one chapter had closed, another may just be beginning. The shadows remained, and with them, the ever-present question, how safe could they truly be?